Good evening, everyone. Hello, everyone that is watching either the live version of this or the recorded version of this. Welcome to the Spiritist Society of Baltimore, our virtual meetings on Saturday. Well, today, before we begin, we always, like we do with all of our meetings, we always open up a short message from the book Happy Life, and then we open up with our prayer. So let us go ahead and do that, friends. So join me in just listening as we read a short message from the book Happy Life. And if you'd like to follow along in the second edition, it is on page 138. A bit of inner silence will do you a lot of good. The constant hustle and bustle, endless worries, and the unexpected all diminish one's moral endurance. It is imperative to set aside some time to recover and practice inner silence. Pray silently, calmly. Let your ideas flow spontaneously, recomposing your emotional and nerve pathways so that you may rejoin the struggle. During such times, reconnect with yourself and experience the joy of loving, caring for, and renewing yourself so that no traces of negativity remain. What a beautiful reminder from Joanna once again to love ourselves and connect through prayer to the divine. So let us do so now. You may close your eyes if you feel comfortable. Just allows us to concentrate in this present moment. Let us open our hearts. Let us open our minds. And let us ask our dear Father, Mother God, our brother Jesus, our mentors and guides of the SSB and our personal spirit guides. We ask for your inspiration, your guidance and protection. And may this evening be fruitful for all those whose minds and hearts are tuned in. And we pray for all those who are in need, those who are in our hearts, those across the world that we know who are suffering, especially from this pandemic. And we pray that each one of us may receive the blessings, the insight, and the solace that we need. In Jesus' name, so be it. Okay. Well, hello again, everyone. Today is a really special day. And let me just see. Hello. We have a special person here today. Who is this? We'll have to unmute you.
Hi, my name is Sarah Dos Santos.
Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today. So, in honor of Mother's Day, because tomorrow is Mother's Day, we thought we would do a presentation. I think it's for the first time together, just to kind of honor this bond and to honor all the mothers out there. And we'll be interacting somewhat during this talk today, and we hope you all feel blessed by it as well. So let me just pull up on my screen there we go. I just have to, there we go. So today our talk is entitled Mediumship in Our Daily Life. Now, you might be thinking, I'm not a medium. What is a medium? Which we'll cover here in a second. Or, we're in the middle of a pandemic. I'm not practicing my mediumship. How is any of this relevant? Well, we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about that and how to live our best life. So let's go ahead and start out. Sarah, you can start us out.
Okay, so one of the 5 main books of Spiritism is the Medium's Book, and it was published in Paris on January 1861. And, excuse me, it consists of special guidelines from the superior spirits about the theory of all kinds of manifestations, the mean of communication with the invisible world, the development of mediumship, the difficulties and pitfalls in the practice of Spiritism. So the Medium's Book is the sequel to the Spirit's Book. And the Medium's Book is broken into 2 parts, the first part being preliminary observations, which consist of 4 chapters: Do spirits exist, the extraordinary and the supernatural, methodology and theories. And the second part consists of spirit manifestations, which is also broken up into 32 chapters. And all those 32 chapters are broken into 3 subcategories, which is phenomena, mediums, and environment. But since our talk today is about mediumship, I'll just briefly touch on the main types of mediumship, which are physical effects mediums, sensitive or impressionable mediums, hearing mediums, seeing mediums, somnambulistic, healing, pneumatographic, writing, or psychographical mediums.
Yes, that was quite a mouthful. Yeah, but that's really good, Sarah. I mean, these are just a overview of what the Medium's Book is. And this talk today, obviously, we cannot encompass all that there is to know about mediumship. This is sort of like a brief snapshot, a TikTok, if you will, of the grander scheme of things. So it's very small. So we do highly encourage each one of you to do your own study. You know, if you don't have the Medium's Book, purchase the Medium's Book, read it. There are many other books that are out there, some of which I'm going to cite, some of which I might talk about here today that exist out there. I don't know if we can see this one. So there's many books that are out there that talk about mediumship and being a medium. So we do encourage you to make sure you go and do your own study and do your own reading, because obviously we can't touch on every single aspect of it. Sorry, Sarah, I'm jumping in.
That's okay. So you may be wondering, Sarah, what is a medium? Well, I'm here to tell you exactly what a medium is. So, according to etymology, the word medium can be derived from the Latin word medium, middle, intermediary. And by definition, a medium is a person who can serve as an intermediary between spirits and incarnates. And according to the Medium's Book, chapter 14, item 159, every individual who senses the influence of spirits to any degree of intensity is a medium. This faculty is inherent to humankind. It therefore does not constitute an exclusive privilege, and there are very few individuals who do not possess it, at least in a rudimentary state. Thus, we can state that everyone is a medium to a certain degree.
Wow. So everyone, like even all your friends are mediums?
Yeah, I think so. I think everybody has a little something there.
A little something, huh? Something, at least something rudimentary, you know, something very basic. It might not be an extensive mediumship, as we could say, might not be clairvoyance, or might not be able to, you know, do automatic writing or what have you. But that's that level of sensitivity, which probably, if you think about it, right, you talked about it with friends, like, oh, I feel weird when I come to this place, or I feel, you know what I mean? Like there's some people who just have that basic sensitivity, which you kind of mentioned here a minute ago, that sensitive or impressionable medium. So yeah, it's always, we have a little something. But I mean, we're talking about medium, so obviously we need to be talking about mediumship, because this is what our talk is about. So what is mediumship? There are many definitions of it. We know that it is an organic faculty, first and foremost. And according to the Spirit's Book, it is independent of our moral elevation. The development of our mediumship is independent of our morality, but the use of it is not. Two different things. Okay? So the development and the use, two different things. One is not dependent on your moral elevation. The other one can affect it, which in other words just means because it's a physical, because mediumship is an organic faculty. It's just something that, that I'm born with. And a lot of people actually also believe, well, oh, it must be genetic because my mom had it, my brother has it, my father has it. It's actually not hereditary. However, when we are born in families, we tend to be born in families that we have a history with. So a lot of times we have history with people with other spirits, I should say, who we come and we reincarnate with, and we have similar tasks that need to be accomplished in this life. That's just a little sidebar to add to also what in the book, Evolution to Worlds, they describe or define as mediumship. And they say mediumship is one of the incarnate human being's attributes, which is used to communicate with the discarnate. Pretty straightforward. We're not going to get into how the depths of in talking about how even in the spirit realm, mediumship exists. Some might not even know that. It's not just when you're incarnated. You could be in the spirit realm and be using mediumship. But again, those are one of the things where we encourage you to go and read and do your own study on. But mediumship, we are all mediums. All of us. Can't run from it. But you might be thinking, oh, why do I even care about it? Right, Sarah? Like, why should I care about mediumship? Like, I don't think I feel anything, even though we're all mediums, we're all sensitive, right? But why would someone really even care about it? Because, I can't feel anything. I can't see anything. Well, let's see what the medium's book says about that. In the medium's book, it says Kardec actually gives a great example of why we should care about mediumship. So he gives the following analogy, story. He says, a certain man has a secret enemy of whom he is unaware, and who, unbeknownst to him, spreads slander and everything of the vilest nature that he can engender. The man loses his fortune, his friends avoid him, and his inner happiness is completely upset. Since he cannot discover the hand that is injuring him, he cannot defend himself and ends up defeated. However, one day the secret enemy writes to him and betrays his identity in spite of his cunning. Having found out who his enemy is, the man can now expose him and recover his reputation. Such is the role of evil spirits, whom Spiritism provides us with the possibility of discovering and outsmarting, thanks to mediumship. So you might be asking yourself, well, I don't know. I don't see spirits. I don't feel them. I'm not an ostensible medium. That's okay. You don't have to be. It's like the same context when we talk about germs. We don't necessarily see them unless we have a microscope, and unless we carry one around. We don't see them, but we are cognizant of them, especially now during a pandemic. We are very much more cognizant of it, of washing our hands and having proper hygiene when we're touching things outside, coming in and washing our hands. Well, it's the same thing with mediumship. You may not see the spirits that are around you or out there, but you're going to want to take preventative measures. What could those preventative measures be? Well, for one thing, living your best life. What does that mean? What does living your best life mean? Well, that can look very different to everyone, but being in tune with our divine selves, being in tune with what we know is right and good. So if the laws of God are written on our conscience, then we should be able to tap into that self, as Jung would refer to as that self, that inner self, our higher self, some may even call it, and tap into that divine within us to help it to guide us. But most importantly, which is so or rather underutilized, is prayer. Connecting ourselves and asking for help when we need it, when we're unsure. So why would we knowingly, live a life careless, knowing that by having certain behaviors, we're attracting negative entities. Sarah, I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but as a young person, I'm sure you've encountered situations where as depicted in these pictures, we can see, and it's pretty scary, right? When you think about it, because with our physical eyes, we're not seeing, or maybe perhaps we don't have the mediumship either. We don't see these spirits that are, previously were incarnated. They continue to have the habit of drinking or smoking or what have you, or just negativity or hatred. And if we're in an environment where all that is perpetuated, it's kind of scary looking at it from this perspective, isn't it?
Yes, can I speak for a little bit?
Yes, please go ahead, jump in.
No, I definitely agree. I've been in situations, not necessarily with alcohol and drugs, but other, toxic, if you will, environments and toxic situations and cycles. And I've talked to people who have dealt with like substance abuse issues, and the thing that they've told me that's most common is that it's really hard to break a cycle when the toxic cycle is all you know. And whenever they talk to me about that, all I can think of is like what kind of obsessive spirits are like hanging around you, because they're right. When you're in a toxic cycle, toxic environment, you can't really get out of that, because it's like, who are you outside of that, environment? Who are you outside of that trauma? So yeah,
it's definitely difficult to get out of, but thankfully we know through spiritism that there is a way out. I mean, it's breaking that cycle, whether it's through prayer and getting the help that we need, whether it's through a substance abuse counselor, a therapist, a physician, whatever else we might need. But there are ways out of it, and there are ways that we can change. It is really difficult, it's definitely. That's why I think we try to help the youth, our children, and just the public to know how detrimental not only alcohol and drugs are, but living a lifestyle full of hatred or anger or jealousy or envy or any of those negative emotions, and living a life. Because let's not dismiss that, because sometimes we just focus on the external. But depending on how we live our lives, like our mind, our thoughts has so much power in our lives, has so much effect on our lives, that we may not even be aware of how powerful that is. And I was just reading this story, and I'm completely forgetting where. I think it was in the book, In the Realms of Mediumship. Yes. There's a story, and it was in chapter 4 of In the Realms of Mediumship. And there's a story, true story, and it's of a father and son, and the son was intoxicated, and he has an altercation with his father, and he's drunk, and the son is drunk. The father is not drunk. And the son goes up to the father and just slaps him in the face really hard. And the father is so appalled, and the father is so like shocked that he curses him. And he curses him in such a way, not using profanity per se, but just saying, I curse the hand that just did that to me, and may it forever shrivel and, never work again, all these things. And then the son took that into his mind so much, and he felt so guilty, and he ended up leaving the place he was with his father, going out, and actually through an accident, he ends up discarnating. But that thought that he took in and accepted as his own from his father, that acted as sort of a spell in a way, was so heavily imprinted now on his paraspirit that even when he discarnated, that hand that he had smacked his father with had really withered, had really become like atrophied. And so when we think about what kind of thoughts we are perpetuating, what kind of thoughts we are nourishing, and that can include the kind of movies we're watching, the kind of music we're listening to, the kind of friends that I'm surrounding myself with. We need to be selective. Right, Sarah? Did you want to jump in? to share any thoughts on that?
No, I completely agree. And, I'm still 19, so everybody else who's watching this talk has already lived their life through the Spirit Center. So, as especially through my last year of high school, I realized like it's not, it's always about like your internal, like you said, your thoughts, your thought patterns, all this stuff. Like, there's only so much the external world can, do to you. But I totally agree. Like, I've noticed like the more I kind of detach myself from people who no longer were serving me, and as you would say, like your higher self, I realized there was like a switch in my life, and I truly believe that this time a year ago, when I was in high school, I was just with the wrong people, and I truly believe that I was surrounded by not so good spirits, and now I can say that with confidence, like that just wasn't a good environment. So I definitely agree the environment you put yourself in will always affect you more than you think it will. So I completely
Absolutely.
agree with that.
Yeah, no, definitely. Absolutely. I mean, and that kind of brings us to our next um not topic, but our next slide, if you will, how mediumship affects our day-to-day lives. Regardless if we believe in it or not, regardless if people believe it or not, it's like people who don't believe in germs. I mean, just because you don't see them doesn't mean they're not there. It's the same with like gamma rays and all these other kinds of UV rays that you don't see. Doesn't mean that they're not going to affect you simply because you don't see them with the naked eye. So it is very important as sort of a preventative medicine in a way, which we'll talk about here in a minute, to know and be cognizant of these things. So let's jump right into it. In the medium's book, they can say, in the medium's book, they say, we can therefore state that mediumship enables men and women to meet their enemies face to face, if we may so express ourselves, and combat them with their own weapons. Without this faculty, evil spirits act in the shadows, and counting on their invisibility, they truly do much harm. So it seems like, Sarah, and you can comment on this too, that perhaps the spirits who are maybe the enemies of an incarnate, or maybe the obsessors or low order spirits, or spirits that don't, are ignorant, they want us to be in the dark, so to speak, because the more we know about them, the more we are cognizant of them, and the more we are more watchful of ourselves, they're at a disadvantage. Whereas if we deny them, or if we were like, oh, that's just a bunch of hokey pokey, or what have you, it's beneficial for them. It's bad for us, but beneficial for them, right?
Yeah, I agree. When I was like a little kid and, there was all this talk in the Spirit Center, like, oh, never lower your thoughts because that attracts bad spirits. I always thought to myself, like, these bad spirits, they really don't have a lot going for them. So in a way, when you give your energy to them, that's the only thing they get to feed off of, So like that's really the only thing they would have going for them. So I always
That's
thought
a
to
great
myself,
point.
yeah, like I always thought to myself, like, well, I don't want to be the only good thing going for them because I have other things that I want to be good going for me, So
I love that. That is great.
So
That's a great point. Let me just say a sidebar too. These spirits, these obsessors, they have been our victims from the past, or accomplices, or, somehow we were in an entanglement, if you will, in the past where we might have hurt them, and vice versa. So they are still attached to us because of that, and they carry around that anger sometimes for centuries. So we always want to look at obsessors and these enemies with compassion and love, and they deserve prayer, and they deserve, God's love in as much as we do. So just as a sidebar, because sometimes we might have a tendency to paint them as like the bad guy, when in reality, everything happens for a reason. Divine law is perfect. How God created the universe is perfect. So if we are finding ourselves in that situation, it's because there's something for us to learn from and to grow from. And that's why we were mentioning just a few minutes ago about preventative medicine. So this is sort of preventative for us to not go into a deeper, more destructive obsession, or go through a more deeper or destructive, harsh time in our lives. We can prevent that from being aware that the spirit world exists and being aware of those laws of how things work. Being aware that when I'm tuning my mind into a negative vibration, I'm opening myself up to these other spirits to also tune their mind into mine as well. So why is that bad? Well, if I'm at a, let's say, a certain vibratory level, and I have spirit enemies from the past that are lower, so they can be around me, but they aren't able to harm me because my vibration is higher. But once something happens, whatever it may be, that just lowers my vibration, whether I get angry or I have a really horrible day or I get to an altercation or something happens, lowers my vibration, then I become in tune with these spirit enemies that oftentimes are just waiting for that opportunity to pounce. That's when they'll really, sink their teeth into you, if you will, where they'll really begin to start the process of obsession and disturbing you. And most times, and this is one thing that people may not realize, is that obsession is not something that happens like that, like with a snap of the finger. It is oftentimes, it starts subtly, and it's the little things at first. That's why it's important for us to live our lives and be cognizant on a day-to-day basis of such things. So, Sarah, I'm going to actually have you read this text. This is from this book, which is amazing, absolutely amazing. If you don't have this book, you need to go and buy it. You can purchase it off of the publisher.com. You can just Google this book. I'm trying to find the actual website, but I don't have it here in front of me, but you can Google it. It's an amazing book. It's entitled Psychiatric and Spirit Obsession Disorders. It is by the medium, Givaldo Franco, by the spirit, Manuel Filomeno de Miranda. And this is just one excerpt from this particular book. Sarah, I'm going to have you read it.
Mediumistic activities, especially those dedicated to disobsession therapies, constitute a magnificent chapter in Spiritist psychiatry as it penetrates the root causes of psychological and mental disorders. Since it is the spirit that is ill, it is in the spirit that the factors responsible for imbalance need to be treated. Chapter 6, page 108.
Perfect. Yeah. So mediumistic activities, obviously we're talking about mediumship. We're going to mention that as well. A couple things to note. One, for the most part, we're still in a pandemic. Not for the most part. We are in a pandemic. And I was going to say, for the most part, I think at least here in the US, people are not meeting in the physical centers and the spiritist centers. So the mediumistic meetings have stopped for the time being. But just so we are aware of how important those meetings are, this is from Dr. Miranda in this book. And he says it constitutes a magnificent chapter in Spiritist psychiatry because it gets to the root of psychological and mental disorders. So it plays a huge role. And that's why, again, it's important for us to understand mediumship. Since we're all mediums to some degree or not, and knowing from Dr. Miranda in this book that the source of illness is within us, the spirit. As he says, the factors responsible for imbalance need to be treated. And we highly, highly, highly recommend you read and study this book. It's not a book of messages. It's a series. It's a book that's in a series of books with Givaldo Franco, the medium, and Dr. Miranda. They have multiple other books as well. Planetary Transition. I think there's a book, Torments of Obsession, as well, and probably a handful of many other ones that are equally just as amazing and very important for us to educate ourselves and our minds about mediumship and the ins and outs and things that happen. So it's important for us to understand this, because when we're talking about, not only preventative medicine, but what happens when I already have the illness, mediumship is a beautiful way that we are able to help those that are suffering when they're coming to our Spiritist centers, when they're in need of assistance. Now, not every psychiatric or mental disorder is an obsession, and vice versa. But usually there's a component of it. Usually there's, because we're all mediums, we have some component of spirit, disturbancy somewhere in there. So that's why it's also really important for us to understand this, no matter what age we are. Right, Sarah? I mean, it's important for you to know this. It's important for anyone to know this, to understand this, right? Let me just see if I can move my slide is not moving. Okay. So there's this phrase in the Bible that Jesus says, "For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." So wherever we put all of our heart, our emotion, that is where our central desire will be. That is where, where in actuality, in the book Action and Reaction, they talk about central desire as one of the things that obsessors identify within us as to use it against us. So if my central desire, like my deep, deep, deep in my heart, what I really want is something materialistic, or if I really, really want, let's say, for instance, I want to be king of the nation, and but my brother who is, in the way, he's next in line. Although I don't really want to kill him, but somewhere deep, deep inside of myself, I do. So that central desire is found by these spirit obsessors. So it's important for us to talk about our morality, working on ourselves, working on our thoughts, working on what kind of person I am. Because remember, mediumship is a organic faculty. So it's independent of morality, but how we use it and how it works, right? What messages come through, who I connect to, is dependent on morality. If my vibration is high and I'm constantly trying to tune my mind to my spirit guides, if I'm always trying to enrich my mind with enriching literature, positive literature, things that really help me to expand and open my mind, to learn more about love and all those things, love for humanity, love for myself, and charity and all those wonderful virtues, then my vibration is going to be high and I'm going to be in tune with good spirits. And the opposite is true. If I'm not tuned in, and listen, we all have bad days, right, Sarah? I'm sure you're first year in college, just about finished, and I'm sure there are many bad days, and that's okay. We're allowed to have bad days. But let's validate our own emotions. But let's also know, like, okay, I feel this way. What can I do to help myself? Because I don't want to stay in this negative vibration. Times are hard, times are tough. Let me pray. Let me reach out to my spirit mentor, my guides. I mean, some of you might also be thinking, mediumship, spiritism, it's not modern, it's not relevant. You can get so wrapped up in so many other things, social media. But it actually is really modern and relevant. It's actually quite amazing. And we found something in the mediums book that's labeled as human telegraphy or telegraphy. And it's question 58 in the mediums book. And they ask the spirits, can two persons evoking each other simultaneously transmit their thought and communicate? Can two persons evoking each other simultaneously transmit their thought and communicate? They're not talking necessarily about, discarnate spirits here, folks. Okay? They say yes. And this human telegraphy will someday be a universal means of communication. Why can't it be practiced at present? It already is by some, but not by many. Men and women must purify themselves more so that their spirit is freer of matter. A further reason why evocation must be made in God's name. Until then, it will be restricted to pure souls and to those who are dematerialized, something that is quite rare in the current state of Earth's inhabitants. How about that, Sarah? It's like the soul phone. It's like you can just, there's not an external phone, but you kind of just, you're thinking of, let's say your best friend, let's call her Kelly, and you're thinking of her and you transmit your thought, and she also is on the same wavelength as you. And let's just say you both have, you're not perfect, but you're really good and you're purified or working towards that. You're able to have that connection. I mean, isn't that amazing? Like, we won't, in the way future and highly evolved worlds, we're not going to need cell phones. We're going to be able to have it literally at our fingertips, so to speak. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
So, actually, this has happened to me quite a few times. I don't know if the watchers are watching. Leo's daughter, Lulu. We've been like practicing our spirituality, like a lot. We call each other regularly. Meditate, all this stuff, like really grounding ourselves. And a couple times, like, this has happened to us where we were in the same room, we were like just sitting in silence, and all of a sudden we turn to each other and say the same thing, and we're like, what? Like, how like us teenagers act. But the most common thing for me and her, and it's only happened for me and her, is where I'll be sitting in my room and just being like, oh, I wonder what Lulu's up to, and immediately I will get a phone call without fail. Hope my phone doesn't go off right now. I'm gonna sit it upstairs. But and the same thing happens to her. Many times she's told me, Sarah, I was just thinking about you and you called me. So not saying that that's a regular means of communication between her and I, but like, it's pretty interesting that you mentioned that, because that has happened to me a lot, frequently. So
yeah, it sounds like what you're describing as telepathy, and this ability to sort of, it's kind of like, even I would say it's a precursor to this. It's like that beginning. It's kind of like a pager, a spiritual pager. We're able to, a pager was a thing of the past. And I know more so like, I don't know, before the year 2000, maybe the early 90s, pagers might still exist in some remote areas of the world. But pagers were this thing you could wear like on your belt buckle or wherever, had a little clip, and you page someone your phone number and they would call you back at that number. So it's kind of like a spiritual pager. Like, you're thinking like, oh, Lulu, let me page you. And then she captures that and then she calls you. So a lot of people that have that affinity with one another have that ability to sort of connect on that level. And that's pretty cool. It's also not necessarily always common, but it definitely can happen. And although the Spirit's book doesn't say it's a precursor, I'm just thinking and rationalizing in my mind that it's quite similar in its nature, we would say. But definitely is something really fascinating, and something definitely to really look forward to. And when we're talking about looking ahead to the future, all the things that we would benefit from if we would work on ourselves, all the things that would change in our lives, our overall health and well-being, the more we connect to the divine within us, to the divine that created us, to the divine around us, the better off we will be. And in the Medium's book, again, they're reminding us, don't think that mediumship is given only to correct one or two individuals. Rather, the objective is greater. It is meant for all humankind. As individuals, mediums are very unimportant instruments. So mediumship is meant to help all of humanity. It's meant for the goodness of all. It's not meant for mediums to be put up on a pedestal, which sometimes happens inadvertently. But it has a higher purpose. And it's truly up to us, as we learn in the Spirit's book, and in the Medium's book as well, and many other Spiritist books, that it's up to us to work on our own morality, to higher our vibration. They continue on in the Medium's book. They say, thus, when we provide instructions of general interest, we utilize mediums who offer us the required abilities. But you can be very sure that the time will come when good mediums will be quite common, and good spirits will no longer have to use faulty instruments. So, Sarah, that's really something to look forward to in a way. I mean, it might, right now, for some people, it might be really scary when they think of ghosts, as some people call spirits. But when we evolve and begin that going to purify ourselves, even on higher worlds, on more perfected worlds, we already have this open communication. There's no need for all these instruments that we have now. So it's something for us to look forward to, that one day there will be many mediums. We will evolve into good mediums. It's the law of progress. We can only go forward. We can't go back. So it's like inevitably we're all going to get there, but it depends on us how fast we get there. But if I were to tell you, you can be really happy, you'd want to know how to get there. You want to do what you need to do to be really happy, right, Sarah? Yeah. I mean, who wouldn't? But it's hard work. It's not easy at all. They're really hard days. And it's even like we are our own worst enemy. Because of habit, we continue those cycles of thought processes, having the same inner conversations with ourselves and attracting negativity. And then it just keeps us down. That's why we say it's work. It's work every day to have to pay attention to our thoughts, what we're thinking, what we're saying, how we're feeling, to know where the adjustments need to be made. So we can start changing today. And I don't know if anyone remembers Smokey the Bear. And if you do, if you remember Smokey the Bear, please drop a comment in the chat. And for those of you who are not American, or I'm not even sure if this is outside the US, I don't believe it is, maybe Canada, but I don't think so. Smokey the Bear was this huge campaign that's still like ongoing by the Department of Agriculture. And the big slogan was, only you can prevent forest fires. And this came to our mind when we were studying about changing, making changes. And Smokey the Bear came to our mind, and Smokey the Bear just saying, only you can change you. When we were thinking about this, Joanna came to our mind, this excerpt from the book, Times of Health and Conscientiousness. She says, it is imperative that you get positively involved with the divine plan. Those who do not never grow. If you would rather suffer, you are free to do so until you finally opt for well-being. So do not make mountains out of molehills. No one is destined to suffer. Suffer is always the result of a negative action, never the cause. So getting positively involved with the divine plan. What would that look like to you, Sarah, if as you're reading that, what comes to your mind? Like, how do you get positively involved with the divine plan? It kind of sounds like that's what you do. Like, you like to meditate. You like to just tap into your spirituality and connect with just, your higher self. But what else comes to your mind, if anything else comes to your mind, about, connecting with this divine plan?
Well, I am still 19, so ultimately I do not know what my divine plan is, that what God has for me. But I kind of think of like, where do I want to be when I'm 90 years old and I'm reminiscing on my life? What do I want to look back on and be like, oh, I did this good, but oh, I wish I could have changed this differently. So I kind of envision myself as like a 90-year-old looking back in my life. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna do things that would make my older self happy. So I try and center my actions around that. And I'm not perfect. Like I'll do some. Oh my God. Okay, this is really funny. Lulu's actually calling me as I was just thinking about her, so that's an example. But side note. But I just kind of I let go. I kind of like, I don't know how to explain this. Like when I'm having negative thoughts, for example, I kind of detach myself in a way, and I think, okay, what is the root of this? Why am I upset? The other day I got in an argument with my mom, and she was really pressing me. I was pressing her too. I was really pressing her too. But I was like, what is the root? Is she the one making me mad, or am I just mad at something else and just taking my anger out on her? I had to like kind of dissociate myself from that. So I just kind of think of like, what would my 90-year-old self want me to do? I just kind of.
I love that.
So
I love that. I love that. That's fantastic. It's like your higher self, that your more mature self, if they were to look back. And I always like this thing that I read somewhere. It's called the 5-year rule. And whenever you're going through something, you ask yourself, in 5 years, is this going to matter? In 10 years, is it going to matter? In 15 years, is this going to matter? It kind of puts things into perspective for us. And yeah, Sarah, I think you said it correctly. There are even people my age, and I'm 38, who we don't necessarily know our divine plan. But the point is to get involved, is to connect, to connect your mind, to connect to spirituality, to recognize our purpose in this world is not to amass things or titles. Although there's nothing wrong with going to school, getting educated, that's important. But it's more important to work on the kind of person that you are, to be the best version of yourself, right? So some take-home reminders, like where do we even begin? So a couple things. Sarah, I'm going to have you read this. This is from Times of Health and Conscientiousness by Joanna DeAngelis and the medium Givaldo Franco, just an excerpt from the book.
Forgive me if I butcher some words, guys. Without a guilty conscience, sentimentality, or coercion, I think, make an honest evaluation of your life and awaken to what you should produce that is good, useful, and constructive, fully invested in your happiness.
And I'll talk on this part. So let's go back here for a second. It's beautiful what Joanna says, without a guilty conscience, and you just mentioned this, Sarah, like making an honest evaluation of ourself. Sometimes it means in the moment when I'm going through something. Sometimes it means about my life. But whatever it is, it's not looking at ourselves with dread and with remorse and just regret, and just saying, okay, where am I at? Where do I want to be? And what am I doing to make that happen? Those are important things it's sort of a tool we can utilize. And people often might say, well, I don't know where to begin. I mean, I got so much going on. I got so much going on in my life. Well, begin right where you are. What are you feeling now? What do you feel your biggest issue is? And do that honest evaluation of yourself. And don't forget, you have another tool in your toolbox, and that's prayer. In the Spirit's book, they tell us that when we pray, the higher spirits, our spirit guide, will give us 3 things. Prayer is spiritual CPR, quite literally. It gives us courage, patience, and resignation. It helps us to endure whatever it is that we're going through, whether we caused it or not, whether we know what it is or not. Sometimes we have emotions we don't know where they're coming from. Whatever it is that you feel uncomfortable with, or even when you're happy, to praise and thank God. Let's not forget that too, because oftentimes we only do it when we're in a really bad situation. Let's not also forget to pray to God and the good spirits, to give praise to them for assisting and helping us through so many things that we probably weren't even aware of that they helped us with. How many things, opportunities and moments they've inspired us, and we've obviously been at that vibratory level to accept it. So we have a lot to be grateful for. And we've talked about gratitude before and how beneficial it is. So I'm going to let you read this part of the medium's book.
Okay. In many circumstances, our protector spirits can point out the best path for us to follow, but without leading us to it. Otherwise, we would lose all initiative and wouldn't do anything without resorting to them, which would be harmful to our evolution. In order to progress, humans must continually acquire experiences at their own expense.
That's pretty deep. So our guardian angel, our protector spirit or spirit guide, whatever term you want to call it, can point out the best road. Say, this is the best road over here, but without leading us to it. Because ultimately we are the ones who make the decision, because we have to learn from our mistakes as well. Continually acquiring experiences at our own expense. Each one of us goes through this, but we can make it easier or harder depending upon how we choose to go about it. If we continuously make the effort to connect to our spirituality, to make our environment around us pleasant, good, and healthy, whether it's our physical environment, our friends, and also the types of thoughts that I'm nourishing and that I'm thinking about, they have power. Did you have any thoughts on that, Sarah, you wanted to share before we wrap things up?
No, I agree. I've definitely made a lot of stupid, I guess is the best word, decisions, but not stupid. But and I look back on them and wait, sorry, what did you say?
No, so ignorant. Ignorant, not knowing any better.
Yeah, ignorant decisions, and some of those decisions have led me to be in the rock bottom, like literally the peak of rock bottom. I guess you call it that. But going to like therapy and all this stuff, like I talk to like other people too, and they ask me like, oh, would you ever change, some of your decisions you've made? And I honestly say no, even though those decisions have caused me a lot of pain. Like having the knowledge that I have now, I wouldn't have it if I hadn't went through those things. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like a blessing in disguise. I feel like if you're going through something really tough, in the moment it can be like, oh my God, when is this going to end? But when you come out of the end of it, see the light at the end of the tunnel, it's kind of like, wow, like I really learned a lot. I learned a huge lesson. And, Spiritism always says like there's a greater lesson to be learned. And that's honestly so true. Like you're constantly learning, and this is just, adding to your growth and progress as a spirit. So.
Absolutely. No, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's all for our own betterment. It's all for our own progress and for us to grow from and for us to learn from. The question we should always be asking is, what is the lesson in all this? What am I meant to learn? And how can I grow from this? Because if I'm not growing from it and if I'm not learning from it, the cycle is going to repeat. It's going to keep happening until I get from it and grow from it and learn from it what I need to move on. Otherwise, you get stuck in this cycle of repeated again and again and again. But just some tips from the book Living Spring by Emmanuel and Chico Xavier for changing habits in general, changing habits of our thinking, of our behaviors, that Emmanuel shares with us in this beautiful book called Living Spring. It's a book of messages. I highly recommend if you don't have it. It's a great book to have at home, in the car, in your purse, even though it's not very small. But it's a great book to always have on hand if you just need to grab something to inspire you in that moment. And Emmanuel says, education And he just doesn't specify spiritual education, just all education. Let's educate our minds. And when we're educating our minds, let it be something spiritually constructive, something that's opens up our mind. In the book Family Constellation by Joanna DeAngelis, by the medium Givaldo Franco, there's a chapter entitled God at Home. And Joanna actually says that when you're doing your God at home, don't have to necessarily use a spiritist book per se, but a book that's uplifting, a book that uplifts our minds to the great divine, something to help purify ourselves. So just something that's really constructive reading. It could be anything that is helping us to be the best version of ourselves. That could mean, even if I know, Sarah, you can relate to this. You just took psychology and sociology, and some of it might seem a little bit boring, but a lot of it's really interesting. You can kind of apply that to understand the broader concepts of life and things in general. And another great thing is instructive lectures, Emmanuel says. We have so many of these thanks to modern technology, thanks to YouTube, and many other platforms just like it. We're able to access at no cost, for the most part, we would say, instructive lectures. You can find hundreds of them online, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of those online, because obviously we're in the middle of pandemic, so we're not necessarily going to things in person. But when things are in person, there are many lectures you can attend. Here in Maryland alone, we have a handful of spiritist centers that you can go to. And you can look on our calendars and see which topics we're covering at that time. Or you can go online and see the previous ones that we've already discussed and talked about. But taking your free time to nourish yourself. We're not saying going to the movies is bad, but let's be really intentional with what we feed our minds. Emmanuel goes on to say the practice of simple goodness. It's the simple things. It truly is the simple things. One little thing can mean the world to somebody else. And we don't often give a lot of value to small things, small acts of kindness. Something as small as you're walking by your neighbor's door and you notice that their package was left outside because they weren't home, and it's pouring rain out, and it's a cardboard box, and obviously the rain's going to get in, so you grab it for your neighbor and you let them know, hey, I grabbed your box. I mean, it's something simple. They feel, loved for, cared for, thought about. He goes on to say dissemination of consoling and instructive books. And this goes on to sharing the knowledge that we have. We're not talking about imposing, but sharing with others. That's why here at the Spiritist Society of Baltimore, we love to share these lectures. We love to share the message of Spiritism because it is enlightening, because it consoles our hearts and our minds. And Sarah, I know you can relate to this, the practice of meditation. Joanna DeAngelis talks about that a lot in many of her books. It can be guided meditation. It could be any kind of meditation that you feel comfortable with doing. But the practice of meditation, these are just some tips that you can take home and begin to utilize to change yours and our vibratory level so we can be the best mediums. And since we're in the middle of a pandemic, for those of you who were practicing mediums, you might be thinking, what do I do now? I feel like, I'm useless. You're not useless. You have a purpose still. And in a book that I don't remember, but it's by Chico and Emmanuel, I do believe, and Chico Xavier Emmanuel talks about the ways in which we can be the best medium when we can't actually be a full-fledged medium, like being a medium that we are psychographing something or automatic writing. He says that what we can do is be a medium of goodness. You know, if you want to be a medium that psychographs works, or a speaking medium. So he says, okay, well, write someone a nice letter. Think about your loved one, or your sister, or your brother, or maybe an aunt or an uncle, or maybe a teacher or a classmate that's been so helpful to you all year round, or a neighbor, whoever. It can even be someone that's on social media, leaving a positive comment instead of a negative one. In the world of anonymity, people tend to think like, because it's just the internet, I can say whatever I want to say and it's not going to make any difference. But instead of putting something negative or posting something negative, let's be a medium where we are sharing positivity. You know, and if you want to be a talking medium someday, talk positivity, not just to yourself, but to others. And talk good about people. Instead of gossiping, saying negative things, say positive things. Let's use our words, the blessing of our faculty of speaking, as a way to bless others. You know, it can be a common thing sometimes, especially amongst women, where you can sometimes see cattiness and jealousies and things like that. But we should be uplifting one another, whether you're male or female. But we should be uplifting one another, encouraging one another. Especially if one of us is going through a hard time, encouraging you to keep going. Sometimes the most beautiful thing is getting a text message out of nowhere from a friend who was thinking about you and just wanted to say, hey, just thinking about you, sending you lots of love and positivity. So those are just little ways that we can be mediums, especially now in this pandemic, of goodness, utilizing our own abilities to transmit positive things. So this, dear friends, is not too little. You know, we can look at this little mouse who's so adorable and has this little barbell. Nothing is too small. And every effort that we take is good. So we thank you so much. And I thank you, Sarah, and everyone that has been listening and participating or may have dropped a comment. Let me just stop sharing here for a second. If I can get my, I think I'm not sharing anymore. Okay. And we can go to this portion of our talk today where we can see if there are any comments or there we go. We have Ida Sema saying good evening. And we have my mom, Marisa, saying good afternoon. Yasko, hello. And yep, we have lots of people just saying hello to Chris and everyone else that is joining and listening to us. And so we have some questions. So I'm going to ask the question, and Sarah, if you want to jump in, if you want to answer, please feel free. And we will keep the question up even throughout our answer, just because we think that's good. We actually got a suggestion last time about that. So this first question comes from Yasko, and she says, how about those that just see or sense the presence of the spirits, but not interact with them or receive their influence? Are they mediums? Sarah, did you want to answer that? I can help you with it, but did you want to touch on that?
I think so, yes. I mean, it's not like a direct medium thing where it's somebody's whispering in their ear, like, hello. But it's like, I think so. I 100% believe so. I remember being little and, like, walking into a store and just being like, ooh, I don't want to be in here anymore. I just want to leave. And, you know, my dad would always be like, oh, like, yeah, that's kind of like mediumship. So I 100% believe that is mediumship. It might not be, like, strong. But, I mean, everybody has a little bit of mediumship. Even when you feel vibrations of another person, I think that really is mediumship. Like,
that sensitivity to feeling the spirits. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think you answered it perfectly. So yeah, we are still mediums, even if we aren't interacting with them directly. Oftentimes, if you've ever caught yourself if you've ever found yourself talking to yourself, you're never, they say, Andrea Louise and Notsalar and many of the collection of Andrea Louise and Chico Xavier books, they say that we're never ever just talking to ourselves. Oftentimes when we're having an internal conversation, we're conversating with someone, and it's generally a spirit. It could be our spirit guide, it could be a familiar spirit, or it could be a not so great spirit that probably maybe not doesn't want good for us. But we're never just talking to ourselves. So for those people who think, I'm not interacting, chances are you probably are. You just don't realize it. But thank you, Yasko, for your question. Looks like we have another one too. If you want to post another one, it looks like, oh, great. Marisa saying, I had that pager with my deceased husband. Yes, I had that connection. I remember growing up and my parents very much so being connected. And if I was with one of them and they were saying, oh, they were thinking about the other, they would call. So it was quite common. I remember my mother telling stories upon stories of things like that happening quite often. So thank you for sharing. Paula shares with us, wonderful talk, idea, and sharing. Sarah, how do you check out what your thoughts are, and how do you shift them to the positive?
Sorry, I was trying to find the unmute button. So usually when I have like a repetitive negative thought pattern, I at first I allow myself to kind of be in that cycle for like 5-10 minutes. I don't like immediately be like, all right, what's the positive thing about this? I let myself feel the emotions because I'm human. I'm not like a perfect spirit in this world. So I kind of just let myself sort it out. And then after I'm done like being well emotional, I kind of think to myself, okay, what's the root of the problem here? Like what is the root of the problem, and what can I do to aid my not suffering, but like what can I do to aid these thoughts, and I kind of just like think of like some of the problems in like a glass half full mentality. So like the other day I got a really bad grade in a paper, and I was sitting in my room just crying for like 2 hours straight, like just super upset. And then I was just like, you know what, what's a good thing that will come out of this? I have the opportunity to possibly, redo the paper, get some points back. I now I know how to do like a real college paper, so I try and like shift away from like, oh my god, poor me, to okay, what's a better outcome here? Like what's the bigger picture here? What can I do? Because honestly, I found that just sitting and wallowing in self-pity and pain, it really isn't helping. It really is not. So you might as well try and find some good out of it, because the more you give energy to that negative thought pattern, the more it's going to just continue to just be a whole cycle in your life. And then you're not going to be able to get out of it. And then it's going to just it's just going to have a snowball effect, So that's kind of what I do.
I love it. I think that was great. Yeah. All right. Oh, Ida Sama shares, fantastic talk this evening. Both made the topic wonderfully well, make us want to learn more and more about the subject and apply teachings to our day-to-day. Thank you, Ida Sama. And then we have another question from Yasko. So she says, so in severe cases of psychiatric disorder with significant obsession component, how careful should the process of disobsession, considering that there have been long magnetic symbiosis between the two? Fantastic question, Yasko. And I'm going to share this book again for those of you who just want to look at it one more time. This is the book that this great way to answer this question too is reading this book, Psychiatric and Spirit Obsession Disorders by Givaldo Franco, by the Spirit Manuel Filomena de Miranda. Excellent question. So yes, Yasko, you're right. So when there is a very, we would say, severe obsession that has been ongoing for quite a long time, and it becomes like a symbiosis, they say in the literature that if they were to remove the obsessor spirit, the person can die. The incarnate person can die because the symbiosis is so intertwined that it can cause immediate death. So yes, so it has to be a slow process of educating or attempting to educate both the obsessor and the incarnate. So that's why you might find cases where they're either, getting assistance with, let's just say it's someone comes to the Spiritist Center, which is pretty common, and they're looking for help. They feel like their loved one is under an obsession. And, so on the spirit side, let's just, for the sake of this conversation, let's just say this particular case, there is a spirit involved. And let's just say that the incarnate is deeply disturbed and has a spirit attached to them. So the mentors will begin to assist this incarnate. And we will also, if the opportunity arises, if it's possible, that's the best thing they say. If someone is undergoing an obsession or a disturbancy, they should go to the Spiritist Center and be open to receiving the passes and education and really modifying their own behaviors and thoughts. That's first and foremost. The higher spirituality and the literature really wants us and encourages us to do, but also in this spirit world, they're working with that spirit obsessor. And oftentimes during our mediumistic meetings, that obsessor is brought and they're having a therapeutic session as well. And sometimes it takes multiple sessions, and sometimes it can take months to years. It just depends upon the nature of what's going on. So it can be a really long process of disobsession. And sometimes it's more than just one spirit, and some really difficult, challenging cases. So, and the law of God is perfect. The divine laws are perfect. There are no mistakes with divine law. If we are enduring something, it's something for us to grow and learn from on both ends. That's not to say that we have to endure it for an extended period of time. It depends upon ourselves to make the changes. But thank you, Yasko. That was a great question. And Sarah, do you want to read Yasko's comment? This pertains to you.
Do you want me to read out loud?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I am delighted with Sarah's honest, heartful testimony of her own experience as a teen. It will be so helpful to teens undergoing ups and downs, doubts about their values, or about their lives here on the planet. So fantastic. Oh, thank you. That's so nice.
That is so nice. Let's see if any other comments. Okay, so Juliana asks, could you talk more about the daily practices one can do to become more conscious about their mediumship, such as meditation, prayer, self-knowledge, etc.? Yes, and Sarah, I'll let you jump in with this as well. So we always say that someone's daily practice is to connect them to be more conscious with their own mediumship, which really is just hiring our vibration and putting ourselves at a higher vibratory level. It's kind of like if you've ever played an instrument like guitar or piano, you have to fine tune it. It's the same thing with mediumship. We want to be fine tuning ourselves. So everyone's can do different practices, because for different people, different things work. So for some people, daily meditations work really well. I grew up watching my mother. She used to get up and have this very disciplined habit of getting up very early, praying and reading from one of the Spiritist books, whether it was the Gospel or some other positive, uplifting book, just to sort of set her mind for the day and to allow that to just be, the template of how she wanted to set her day to. So it can be really different for everyone. For some people, it's doing yoga and meditation. It's just creating a habit of positivity where you're connecting. Maybe it's listening to a podcast, or having it on in the background of, doing some house cleaning, or while you're at work, you're listening to, some uplifting music, whether it's classical music or otherwise. So it's creating habits within your day-to-day that will enable us to tune ourselves to a higher vibratory level, which then obviously makes us good mediums, because then once we're hiring a vibratory level, then the good spirits, our spirit guide, can more readily access us and give us inspiration and give us guidance. And we'll be able to tune in to the higher minds that are just around, not only us around us, but even the higher minds that are wherever they are, you know? So it's always a good thing to think about and experiment with what positive practices can I utilize on a day-to-day basis. Because some might say, well, yoga is not really my thing, but I really love meditating. And some people might say, well, I love praying, just talking to God in the morning or at night, or I journal and I review my day. So for everyone, it's different. So you might want to try different things to see what works, what works for you. I hope that, Sarah, did you have anything to add to that?
You pretty much bullseyed that answer.
Okay.
I don't really have any other comments. I think I agree with everything you said. Just finding what works for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Well, I think that's to the extent of our questions and comments. Thank you, everyone. Oh, Lulu was joined too. Hi, Lulu. Thank you so much to everyone that watched, that participated, that commented. We hope that this has served as a source of enlightenment and solace. And the last comment for today, I guess, is Sarah, you are so emotionally intelligent. Can't wait to follow your progress as an adult. Oh, we love you, Paula. And that's just okay. All right. Thank you, Chris. He says, great job, ladies. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everybody. So we're going to end our meeting now, and we'll be doing the final prayer for this evening. And Sarah, let me just open up. I don't know where it went to. I guess it won't be opening it up. I was going to try to open up my PowerPoint to the last slide, but that's okay. Sarah, would you lead us into prayer, or end prayer to end our meeting for this evening?
Yes. So, dear God, thank you for our time here today with each other, and thank you for allowing us to all learn with each other and elevating our thoughts. We ask that you please bless all of the people who have gathered here with us today, and the people who are also not able to be with us here today, physically and spiritually, and let them be guided by the higher spirits and the mentors as well. Please bless all of the people who might not be as fortunate as we are, and people who are suffering, and let them be guided with the higher spirits as well. And so be it.
So be it. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Sarah. Have a good night, everybody.